The great arena of Vorthal Prime was alive with the sound of drums and deep, echoing horns. It was a massive structure, built of dark stone and glowing silver metal. Stretching high into the alien sky, thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered here. They came in every shape and size, some with scales, some with fur, others made of metal and light. They had come for one reason: the Grand Combat Trials, a contest to decide the next champion of the Vorthal Empire. On the highest seat, under a canopy of woven gold threads, sat the alien queen. She wore a crown shaped like the wings of a great bird and armor made of shining crystal plates. Her eyes were sharp and clear, glowing faintly as she studied the fighters who stood on the sands below. She was the ruler of dozens of worlds, a leader feared for her wisdom and respected for her fairness. For her, these trials were not just games. They were tests to find the strongest and most loyal warrior who could stand by her side. The arena floor was filled with powerful alien warriors. Some were giant creatures with thick armor plates, their muscles bulging like stone pillars. Others carried weapons that hummed with strange energy. They stood proud and confident, each sure they would win the queen's favor. Then there was Rian. He stood apart from the rest, wearing plain battle gear given to him only hours earlier. His armor was simple, made of dark leather reinforced with steel. His weapon was nothing special, a standard blade, worn but sharp. He had no towering horns, no thick claws, no glowing skin. He was simply human. When the announcer read his name, the crowd reacted with confusion. Many aliens laughed, pointing at him with mocking gestures. Some shook their heads, wondering why a fragile creature like him had been allowed to enter. To most of them, humans were weak compared to the mighty races of the galaxy. Rian ignored the stares. He kept his breathing steady, his eyes focused on the sand beneath his boots. He had been taken from his world without warning. One moment he had been on a scouting mission in the mountains of his homeland, and the next, a blinding light had swallowed him. He woke in a strange ship surrounded by guards. The only thing they told him was that he had been chosen to compete in the Grand Combat Trials. He did not know why, and he did not care for the glory they promised. He only wanted to survive. A deep voice echoed across the arena. It was the Queen's Herald, a tall alien with skin like black glass and eyes that glowed like fire. He announced the start of the trials, his words booming through the air. The first challenge would be a test of skill and endurance. The fighters were to face off in a series of one-on-one duels. The winners would advance, the losers would be removed from the competition. The gates to the first combat area opened, revealing a wide space filled with stone pillars and high walls. It was designed to force fighters to move, dodge, and outthink their opponents. Rian stepped inside along with the others. The gates shut behind them, sealing them in. The horn sounded. Rian's first opponent was a massive lizard-like warrior with a heavy spiked club. The alien roared and charged at him with incredible speed for its size. Rian did not try to meet the attack with strength. Instead, he moved quickly to the side, letting the club smash into the ground where he had been standing. Dust and sand flew into the air. The alien turned, swinging again, but Rian stayed light on his feet. He kept his eyes on the weapon and the movement of his opponent's shoulders. Each time the alien attacked, Rian was already moving, slipping out of reach. The crowd grew restless. They had expected him to be crushed within seconds, yet he was still standing. Then, when the alien raised its club high for another strike, Rian saw his chance. He stepped in close, striking the alien's side where the armor was thin. The blade bit deep enough to make the alien roar in pain. The club fell from its grip. Before it could recover, Rian delivered a swift kick to its leg, sending it to the ground. The fight was over. The crowd erupted in surprised shouts. Some cheered, others booed, but all were paying attention now. Rian sheathed his blade and stepped back, his breathing steady. He had not gone for the kill. He had simply ended the fight. From her throne, the alien queen watched closely. Her gaze did not leave him even as the other battles continued. She had seen many warriors win through brute strength. This one had used something different: speed, timing, and a clear mind. There was no wasted movement in his fight. Every step had purpose. The next round of duels began. Rion faced a tall, insect-like fighter armed with two curved blades. The alien was fast, darting in with slashing attacks. Rion blocked the first strikes. Feeling the shock travel up his arms, he let the fighter push him back toward a wall, then suddenly sidestepped, letting his opponent's momentum carry it forward. The insect warrior stumbled, and Rion struck the back of its leg, forcing it down. Again. He did not kill. He ended the match cleanly. By the end of the first stage, Rion had won all his duels without taking a single serious wound. The other fighters, who had once mocked him, now watched him with quiet respect. The crowd no longer laughed, and on her throne, the queen leaned forward, her interest in this human warrior growing. For the first time since arriving on this strange world, Rion felt something shift. He had come here only to survive, but now he could feel eyes on him. Powerful eyes, and in the way the queen studied him, he sensed that his journey here was far from over. The sun of Vorthal Prime burned bright above the arena, casting long shadows over the stone walls. The air shimmered with heat, yet the excitement of the crowd only grew. The first stage had been completed, and those who had survived now stood in a separate section of the arena floor. They were the ones who had proven their worth in the duels. Rion stood among them, his simple armor dusty but still intact. Around him, the remaining fighters were a mix of shapes and sizes. Some stood tall and proud, their glowing eyes fixed on the queen's throne. Others kept their heads low, already thinking ahead to the next challenge. Rion stayed calm, his hands resting lightly at his sides. He was not here for glory or titles. He was here to stay alive. The queen's herald stepped forward again. His voice rang out clearly, filling every corner of the arena. He announced that the next test would not be fought against other warriors. Instead, it would be a challenge of survival. The fighters would face dangerous creatures from across the galaxy, each chosen to test speed, strategy, and courage. At the signal, the gates at the far end of the arena began to open. Heavy chains clanked as massive doors slid apart. A deep growl echoed through the air, low at first, then louder, until it shook the sand beneath their feet. From the darkness stepped a beast covered in thick black fur, its eyes glowing red. Its claws were as long as a man's hand, and its tail swung like a heavy whip. The crowd roared in excitement. The fighters spread out, keeping their distance. Some raised their weapons at once, preparing to strike. Others hesitated, unsure of how to approach such a creature. Rion moved slowly, his eyes fixed on the beast. He could see the way it studied them, choosing its target. When it moved, it was fast, faster than its size should have allowed. It lunged at a tall warrior with a horn helmet, knocking him to the ground with a single swipe. Several fighters rushed into attack, but the beast's hide was thick. Blades glanced off its fur. An energy weapon sparked against its skin without leaving a mark. Rion stayed back, watching. He could see the way the creature turned its head before each strike, and the way its tail shifted just before it lunged. He began to move, circling slowly, keeping the beast in his sight. When it charged another fighter, Rion ran toward a fallen spear lying in the sand. He picked it up and spun it in his hands, feeling its weight. The beast turned toward him, its eyes narrowing. It came at him with a roar, claws cutting through the air. Rion did not meet the attack head-on. Instead, he shifted his body just enough to let the claws pass, then drove the spear toward the beast's side. The weapon slid between the plates of bone under its fur, making it howl in pain. The other fighters saw the opening. They struck together, forcing the beast to back away. It swung its tail, knocking two of them to the ground, but now its movements were slower. Rion pressed forward, aiming for the same weak spot. A final thrust brought the creature down, its massive body shaking the ground as it fell. The crowd cheered loudly, and for the first time, some of those cheers were for the human. Rion stepped back, breathing hard but uninjured, his eyes lifted to the queen's throne. She was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. Before the fighters could rest, the herald raised his hand. The first beast was only the beginning. Another gate opened, this time releasing to smaller creatures with long, coiled bodies and sharp beaks. They slithered quickly across the sand, darting toward the fighters in sudden bursts of speed. The horned warrior who had fallen earlier stepped forward, blocking one of the creatures with his shield. The other darted toward Rian. He sidestepped its first lunge, but it turned sharply and came again. This time, he swung the spear in a wide arc, striking the creature across the head. It hissed and retreated, circling him with quick, twitching movements. Rian kept his distance, refusing to let it corner him. He waited until it lunged again, then dropped low, driving the spear upward into its underside. The creature writhed before collapsing. Nearby, the horned warrior had brought down the other with a crushing blow from his mace. The two warriors exchanged a brief nod. In the heat of battle, there was no place for mockery or pride. By the time the last beast had been defeated, the sand was marked with deep claw prints and the broken remains of weapons. Many fighters were wounded, and some had been carried away by the arena guards. Rian stood among the survivors, his armor scratched but still holding together. The queen rose from her throne, the sunlight catching the crystal plates of her armor. The arena fell silent at once. She spoke in a calm but strong voice, praising the skill and courage of the fighters who remained. She said the trials were not only about strength, but also about the mind and the heart. Every warrior here had faced danger, but only those with true purpose would continue. Her words hung in the air, and Rian felt them in his chest. He had no wish to serve her court, yet something about the way she spoke made him think she was not simply searching for a weapon to use. She was looking for someone she could trust. As the surviving fighters were led back to the preparation chambers, Rian glanced over his shoulder. The queen was still watching him, her eyes steady and sharp. He could not tell what she saw in him, but he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The preparation chambers beneath the arena were dimly lit and cool compared to the scorching sun above. The walls were made of smooth black stone that seemed to drink in the light. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling echoed softly in the air. This was where the surviving fighters rested between trials. Rian sat on a low bench, removing the dust and sand from his armor with a damp cloth. The simple spear he had used in the last challenge rested against the wall beside him, round him. Other fighters tended to their wounds, sharpened their weapons, or spoke in quiet voices. A tall alien with metallic blue skin sat across from him, watching silently. After a moment, the alien spoke in a low tone. He said that the trials were not what they seemed. The queen's court had enemies, and some of them wanted to see her replaced. Rian looked up at him, not sure whether to believe him or not. The alien continued, saying that some of the warriors in the trials were not there to win honor, but to carry out a plan that could change the empire forever. Before Rian could ask questions, a group of guards entered the chamber, ordering everyone to return to their assigned quarters. The blue-skinned alien stood and walked away without another word, leaving Rian with uneasy thoughts. Later that night, the chambers were quiet. Most of the fighters had fallen asleep, their weapons close at hand. Rian could not rest. The alien's words stayed in his mind, and his instincts told him there was truth in them. He decided to move quietly through the narrow halls, avoiding the patrolling guards. The deeper he went, the older the stone walls became, marked with strange carvings and faded symbols. He followed the faint sound of voices until he reached a small passage lit by a single torch. There, he saw two figures dressed in dark cloaks. They were speaking in hurried whispers, their heads close together. Rian could not hear every word, but certain phrases reached him clearly. Final trial. Queen's fall, and the throne will be ours. His stomach tightened. These were not just competitors seeking victory. This was an assassination. Plot. One of the cloaked figures noticed movement in the shadows and turned sharply. Rian stepped back into the darkness, pressing himself against the cold stone. The figure's eyes glowed faintly as they searched the hall. After a tense moment, they turned away, and the two disappeared down another passage. Rian returned to his quarters as quietly as he could. He sat on the bench, thinking carefully. He could try to warn the queen, but why would she believe him, a stranger from another world? If he told the guards, They might think he was trying to create trouble for his rivals. He decided to wait, watch, and be ready to act when the moment came. The next morning, the herald came to the chambers to gather the fighters for the next stage. Rian noticed the two cloaked figures. Among the warriors, they were now dressed in normal battle armor, blending in with the others. Their faces showed nothing, but Rian could see the way their eyes moved, always scanning, always measuring. The fighters were led back to the arena, but this time the combat floor had been changed. Instead of open sand, there were high walls, narrow alleys, and tall towers. It looked like a ruined city, built to force fighters into close combat. The queen watched from her throne as the herald announced the rules. The fighters would be released into the maze in small groups. Each would have to find their way to the central tower and claim the banner at its top. The first few to reach it would pass to the next round. When Rian's group was released into the maze, he kept his eyes open for the cloaked pair. He moved quietly through the alleys, avoiding unnecessary fights. The ruins were filled with traps, loose stones that triggered falling nets, hidden pits covered with thin boards, and narrow bridges that swayed above deep drops. Twice, he heard the sound of steel clashing nearby, but he avoided the noise. His goal was not to win the round by speed alone. He wanted to see what the cloaked warriors would do. Near the base of the central tower, he spotted them. They were not heading for the banner. Instead, they were climbing a hidden stairway on the outside of the tower, moving toward a balcony that faced the queen's throne directly. Rian's pulse quickened. He knew this was their moment to strike. He climbed after them, moving as silently as he could. The wind whistled around the tower, carrying the distant roar of the crowd. One of the cloaked warriors reached into his armor and pulled out a small object that glowed with red light. It looked like a throwing blade, but its edges shimmered dangerously. Just as the figure raised his arm to throw, Rian lunged forward. His shoulder slammed into the assassin's side, knocking him off balance. The glowing blade flew wide, striking the stone wall beside the queen's throne and shattering into harmless sparks. The second assassin drew a curved dagger and swung at Rian. He blocked the attack with his forearm, the impact rattling his bones, then pushed forward, forcing the assassin back against the railing. They struggled, each trying to overpower the other, until the assassin lost his footing and fell to the ground below. The first assassin tried to run, but the arena guards were already climbing the tower. Within moments, both were captured. The queen's gaze locked on Rian, her expression still calm, but her eyes sharper than ever. The trial ended early that day. The herald announced that an attack had been stopped and that the queen was safe. The crowd murmured in surprise, their attention now fixed on the human who had acted so quickly. As the fighters were led back to the chambers, Rian walked with steady steps. But inside his mind was restless. He knew he had changed something today. The queen would no longer see him as just another competitor. She would see him as someone who had stepped into danger without hesitation. And that meant his place in these trials was no longer simply about survival. It had become something far greater. The morning sky over Vorthal Prime was painted in shades of gold and deep crimson. The air was cooler than usual, but the energy inside the grand arena was hotter than ever. The crowd had returned in even greater numbers, eager to see what the next stage of the grand combat trials would bring. Word had spread quickly about the human who had stopped an assassination attempt the day before. Rian stood with the remaining fighters in the waiting area. The number of competitors had dropped sharply. Many had fallen to the beasts in the earlier rounds. Others had been defeated in the maze and had been revealed as traitors. Now only the strongest and most cunning remained. Rian's armor had been cleaned and repaired overnight, and his weapon had been replaced with a finely balanced sword. It was light in his hand, but strong enough to withstand heavy strikes. The queen sat on her throne, her posture straight, her crown glinting. In the morning light, she did not speak, but her eyes scanned the fighters as if weighing each one in her mind. When her gaze passed over Rian, it lingered for a moment longer before moving on. The herald stepped forward, raising his voice so it carried across the arena. He announced that the next challenge would take place in the Valley of Machines. a vast battleground filled with ancient war constructs from a forgotten age. These mechanical beasts had been left behind by a long-dead empire, and their only purpose now was to test the skills of the competitors. At the signal, massive gates opened, revealing the valley beyond. Rian and the others stepped inside, their boots crunching over dry, cracked ground. The air was filled with the faint hum of energy, and in the distance, the ruins of giant machines lay scattered like broken statues. Some were the size of houses. Their rusted armor split open, others still glowed faintly, their power cores alive. The first movement came from the shadows of a ruined tower. A giant metal creature stepped into view, its head shaped like the skull of a predator, its limbs powered by pistons and thick cables. The crowd in the arena roared in excitement. The fighters spread out. A pair of lizard-like warriors charged forward, their heavy weapons smashing into the machine's legs. Sparks flew, but the machine swung its massive arm, sending one of them flying into the dust. The other leapt back just in time to avoid being crushed. Rian moved quickly, circling the machine and studying its movements. He noticed that it turned slowly, its right leg dragging slightly with each step. That weakness could be used. He shouted to the horned warrior from earlier, telling him to draw the machine's attention. The warrior grunted in understanding and began slamming his mace against his shield, making as much noise as possible. The machine turned toward him, its sensors glowing red. While it was distracted, Rian ran forward, leaping onto its damaged leg. His sword struck at the exposed cables, slicing through them. The machine stumbled, its weight crashing down onto one knee. Other fighters saw the opening and joined in, hacking at the joints until the machine collapsed completely. Before they could rest, more machines emerged from the ruins. Some were small and fast, darting between the fighters with sharp claws. Others were huge, slow-moving towers armed with energy cannons. The valley became a storm of metal, sparks, and shouts. Rian fought alongside whoever was closest, switching between offense and defense. His movements were quick, his strikes precise. He never wasted energy on wild swings. When a fast machine leapt at him, he rolled under it and slashed upward, cutting its power cables. When a cannon tower turned toward him, he dashed into cover. Before the blast hit, the fight raged for what felt like hours, but in reality, only minutes had passed. Slowly, the fighters brought down the machines one by one. The ground was littered with smoking wreckage. Rian's sword was nicked and scorched, and sweat ran down his face, but he was still standing. The herald's voice rang out, announcing that the trial was complete. The surviving fighters gathered in the center of the valley. Their numbers had been reduced again, and the exhaustion on their faces was clear. As they returned to the main arena, the crowd cheered loudly. The queen rose to her feet, her voice carrying across the space. She praised the skill of all who had survived, saying they had faced not just living foes but the cold, unrelenting strength of the machines. Then she spoke of the qualities she valued most in a champion: courage, discipline, and the ability to fight not only for oneself but for others. Her eyes moved across the fighters once more, and when they stopped on Rian, there was no doubt that she had noticed the way he had led others in battle, without seeking the spotlight. That night, back in the preparation chambers, Rian sat quietly while the others spoke of the battle. Some bragged about their victories, others simply cleaned their weapons. The horned warrior approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He said few words, only that he had fought beside many, but rarely had he met someone who saw the whole battle instead of just the enemy in front of them. Rian gave a small nod. He did not think of himself as a leader, but he understood that in a fight, every small action could decide who lived and who did not. Above the chambers, in her private hall, the queen met with her advisors. Some urged her to focus on the strongest fighters, those who could crush an enemy with a single blow. Others spoke of the human, pointing out his quick mind and sense of strategy. The queen listened without giving her thoughts away, but in her mind, a choice was slowly forming. The night after the Valley of Machines was calm, but the air inside the preparation chambers felt different. The surviving fighters moved with a heavier sense of purpose. each knowing that the trials were nearing their end. Some sharpened their weapons in silence, others closed their eyes in meditation. Rian sat on a bench near the corner, adjusting the straps of his repaired armor. His sword rested beside him, cleaned and polished after the day's battle. A guard approached, wearing the deep blue armor of the Queen's personal watch. Without a word, the guard signaled for Rian to follow. The other fighters turned their heads, curious but saying nothing. Rian rose to his feet, picked up his sword, and walked behind the guard through the narrow stone corridors. They climbed a spiral stairway that seemed to go higher than the arena's walls. At the top, they entered a large chamber lit by soft golden light. The air smelled faintly of rare flowers, and the floor was covered in woven carpets that felt strange under Rian's boots after days of sand and stone. At the far end of the room stood the alien queen. She wore a lighter version of her armor, the crystal plates catching the light like frozen water. Her crown was smaller now, almost like a circlet. She was alone, without her advisors or guards. Human, she said in a clear voice, come closer. Rian stepped forward until he stood a short distance from her. He bowed slightly, unsure of the customs but wanting to show respect. I have watched you in every trial, the queen said. You fight with skill, but that is not what interests me most. I have seen you save those who would have left you behind. I have seen you think before you strike. Many warriors here have strength, but few have a mind like yours. Rian kept his eyes on her, trying to read her expression. I am a soldier, he replied simply. On my world, we are taught that strength without control is dangerous. I fight to survive, but I also fight to protect when I can. The queen tilted her head slightly. And yet you are far from your world. You did not choose to be here. Why risk yourself for strangers? Rian hesitated before answering. Because in battle, even strangers can become allies. If I stand by and watch someone fall when I could help, then I lose something of myself. The queen studied him in silence for a moment. Then she turned and walked toward a wide balcony that overlooked the arena. She gestured for him to join her. From this height, the view was breathtaking. The arena floor was empty now, but the city beyond stretched out in a circle of glowing towers and streets lit by soft blue lamps. Far in the distance, mountains rose like dark walls against the horizon. This empire is strong, she said quietly, but it is not without enemies. You saw that for yourself when you stopped the assassins. I have ruled for many years, and in that time I have learned that strength alone cannot keep the throne. I need people who can see danger before it strikes, who can act without waiting for orders, people I can trust. Rian listened without speaking. I am not yet telling you my decision, she continued, but know this. Your actions have not gone unnoticed. The next trial will be the most dangerous yet, if you survive. The choice I make at the end may change the path of your life forever. She turned to face him again, her gaze steady. Rest well tonight, human. Tomorrow, you will need all your strength. Rian bowed again, then followed the guard back to the chambers. As he walked, his mind replayed every word she had said. She spoke as if she already had a place for him in her plans, but she had also warned him. The next trial could cost him everything. When he returned, some of the fighters looked at him with suspicion, others with quiet respect. The horned warrior nodded once, as if to say he understood that Rian's path in the trials had just shifted. That night, Rian lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought of his home, of the mountains where he once trained, of the comrades he had fought beside. He did not know if he would ever see his world again, but he did know this. He could no longer think only of survival. Now, there was something larger at stake. In the early hours before dawn, the sound of the herald's voice echoed through the chambers, calling the fighters to prepare. The air was colder than usual, and the sky above the arena was still dark, the first light of morning only just touching the horizon. The queen took her place on the throne as the fighters assembled. Her armor today was heavier, more ceremonial, as if the coming trial was not only a test but a display for all to see. The herald raised his arms, his voice carrying like a clear bell. Warriors, the next trial will not be a duel, nor will it. Be a battle against beasts or machines. Today, you face the trial of the Storm Gate. Gasps came from some of the fighters. Rian had never heard of it, but the way the others reacted told him it was feared. The herald explained. The Storm Gate was an ancient structure located far outside the city, in the barren plains where lightning struck the ground even under clear skies. Within the gate's circle, the air itself became a weapon, twisting wind and thunder into a deadly trap. The fighters would be sent there in groups, and only those who reached the center and return would move on. Rian's grip tightened on his sword. He had faced beasts, assassins, and machines, but this trial sounded like a battle against the world itself. As the gates to the arena opened, letting the fighters march toward the waiting transports. Rian glanced once at the queen. She was watching him again, her gaze unreadable. Whatever awaited inside the Storm Gate, he knew one thing. This would be the trial where everything was decided. The sky above the barren plains was gray and restless as the transports landed. Wind swept across the cracked ground, carrying a strange hum that made the air feel alive. In the distance, the Storm Gate rose from the earth like the bones of some ancient giant. Its ring was made of black stone, carved with glowing symbols that pulsed in a slow rhythm. Lightning flickered inside the ring, even though no clouds hung directly above it. The fighters stepped down from the transports, their armor clinking against the metal ramps. Rian felt the static in the air raise the hairs on his arms. His grip on his sword tightened, not from fear of an enemy he could see, but from the unknown nature of the trial ahead. The herald's voice carried over the wind. Warriors, the rules are simple. Enter the Storm Gate, reach the center, claim the crystal key, return to this point alive. Those who fail will not advance. There was no signal to start. The fighters simply began to move toward the towering ring. Some ran ahead, eager to prove their courage. Others advanced more carefully. Rian walked with steady steps, keeping his eyes on the ground for signs of danger. As he neared the gate, the hum grew louder, almost like a deep voice whispering, in a language he could not understand. Then his foot crossed the shadow of the ring, and the world changed. The ground shifted under him as if it were alive. Winds howled from every direction, pulling at his armor and threatening to throw him off his feet. Lightning struck so close that the air burned hot against his skin. The gate's inner space seemed larger than it had from the outside, with winding paths of stone suspended in midair, some broken, others twisting into sharp turns. A fighter ahead of him leapt across a gap but misjudged the distance. A sudden gust caught the warrior, hurling him into the storm below. There was no sound after that. Rian crouched low, moving carefully along the nearest path. He used his sword as a counterweight when the wind grew strong, planting the blade into cracks in the stone to anchor himself every few steps. A burst of lightning would flash across the path, forcing him to wait until it passed before moving again. Halfway across, he saw the fighters struggling to pull themselves up from a ledge, where they had been thrown by the wind. Without thinking, Rian sheathed his sword, crawled to them, and pulled them up one by one. They gave quick nods of thanks before hurrying ahead, but Rian stayed behind for a moment to catch his breath. The winds here were not random. They seemed to shift in patterns, almost as if testing him. He began to time his movements with the rhythm of the storm, stepping forward during the brief moments when the wind eased and ducking low when it surged. Slowly, the center of the trial came into view, a floating platform lit by a single crystal that glowed with deep blue light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and every pulse sent a wave of wind across the arena. Only four fighters reached the platform. At the same time as Rian, they glanced at each other, all knowing only one could claim the crystal key. The largest fighter, a scaled alien with golden eyes, stepped forward first. His heavy frame let him resist the wind better than the others. He reached for the crystal, but the moment his fingers brushed it, a blast of lightning struck from above, knocking him back. Rian realized the crystal could only be taken if the storm's rhythm was understood. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the wind's push and hearing the faint hum beneath it. 3 beats of calm, 1 beat of force. He stepped forward during the calm, reaching the crystal just as the next blast of lightning struck the spot where he had been standing moments before. His fingers closed round the smooth surface. It was warm, almost alive. The instant he lifted it from its pedestal, the wind screamed louder, and the entire arena shifted. The pops began to crumble. Stones fell into the swirling storm below. Rian turned and ran, leaping over widening gaps, gripping the crystal tightly in one hand and his sword in the other. The other fighters followed, some slipping, some catching themselves at the last moment. Near the outer ring, a gust caught one of the fighters he had saved earlier, throwing her toward the edge. Without thinking, Rian hooked his arm around her waist and dragged her back onto the path. Together, they leapt through the gate's shadow and landed hard on the cracked ground outside. The storm faded the moment they exited. The air was still. The hum gone, Rian lay on his back for a moment, breathing heavily, the crystal glowing faintly in his hand. The herald approached, his expression unreadable. "You have claimed the key," he said. "The queen will be told." Rian stood, helping the fighter beside him to her feet. Round them, only a handful of warriors had survived the trial. The others remained inside, lost to the storm. The transports returned, carrying the survivors back to the city. During the journey, Rian felt the weight of the crystal in his hand. It was more than just a token of victory. It was a sign that he had passed a trial that many feared. When they arrived, the queen was waiting in the grand hall. Her eyes were fixed on the crystal as Rian approached. She stepped forward, taking it from his hand. "You have done what few can," she said, her voice calm but carrying a hint of pride. "The storm gate bends for no one. Yet you returned not only with the key, but with others who might have been lost. Strength and honor together are rare. You have both." She turned, holding the crystal up for all to see. "Tomorrow will be the final trial, and after that, the choice I make will change more than one life." Rian bowed, but inside, he felt the tension rise. The final trial was close. The queen's decision was closer. And whatever came next, he knew there would be no turning back. The morning of the final trial came with a silent sky. No wind, no sound of the city's busy markets. It felt as if the entire kingdom held its breath. Rian woke early, his mind sharp, his body steady despite the weight of the days before. He knew this was not only the last test, but also the day the queen would make her choice. The grand courtyard had been transformed overnight. A massive circular arena stood at its center, built from white stone that gleamed under the sun. Carvings of past champions lined the walls, their stone eyes watching the warriors who gathered below. Rian walked among them, feeling their silent presence. The herald appeared, his voice carrying across the arena. "The final trial is not strength alone. It is not skill alone. It is the test of the heart. Today, you will face the mirror beasts. They are not made of flesh and bone, but of your own reflection. They will move as you move, strike as you strike, think as you think. To defeat them, you must be more than yourself." A low hum rose from beneath the arena floor as the stone panels shifted. From the ground, figures began to rise. At first they looked like shadows, then like mist given form. Within seconds, Rian stood face to face with a figure that looked exactly like him. Same armor, same sword, even the same small scar above the brow. Its eyes glowed faint silver. But otherwise it was him in every way. The trial began without a signal. The mirror beast stepped forward, matching his stance. When Rian circled left, it circled right. When he swung his sword, it mirrored the swing with perfect timing. Every attack met with an identical block. All around the arena, other warriors faced the same challenge. Some grew frustrated and tried to overpower the reflections. Those who did were quickly knocked down. The beast seemed to grow stronger. When their opponent fought without thought, Rian stepped back, breathing slow. He realized brute force would never work. He needed to do something unexpected, something his own mind would not predict in advance. He loosened his stance, letting his sword lower slightly. His reflection did the same. Then, instead of striking, Rian dropped his sword entirely and rushed forward barehanded. The reflection faltered for the first time. It had not expected a move that abandoned the weapon. Rian took that moment to sweep its legs and push it to the ground. Before it could recover, He grabbed his sword again and pressed the blade to its chest. The silver glow in its eyes flickered, then faded. The beast dissolved into mist and vanished. He looked around. Few had defeated their reflections yet. Most still struggled. Rion noticed one warrior, the same woman he had saved in the storm gate, locked in a fierce clash. She had skill, but her beast matched every move. Rion called out to her, "Change your rhythm. Do something you would never plan." She hesitated, then threw her sword in the air, rolled forward, and caught it again from a different angle. The beast stumbled. She struck it down in one clean blow. One by one, the remaining beasts fell. When the last one vanished, the herald stepped forward again. "You have passed the final trial." The queen entered the arena. The crowd grew silent. She stood tall, wearing armor instead of royal robes. In her hand, she held the crystal key Rion had claimed in the previous trial. She looked at each warrior in turn. "You have all shown skill. You have all shown courage. But the choice I must make is for more than a champion. I choose one who can stand not only for themselves, but for others. One who can see beyond their own strength." Her eyes settled on Rion. For a moment, the silence deepened. Then she spoke the words that would be remembered for years. "I choose him." The crowd erupted in cheers. Rion felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was not just victory. It was responsibility. The queen stepped closer, her voice lower now so only he could hear. "You will stand beside me as protector of this realm. Your trials were not only for honor. They were to see if you could bear the burden that comes with it." Rion bowed. "I will serve with all I have." That night, the city celebrated. Lights filled the streets, music carried through the air, and food and drink flowed freely. Yet Rion found himself standing on a balcony overlooking the quiet plains beyond the city walls. The queen joined him there. "You are wondering why I chose you," she said. "Yes," he admitted. She rested her hands on the stone railing. "Strength is common. Skill can be learned. But heart, true heart, is rare. In the arena, in the storm, and even when no one was watching, you acted for others. That is why you are here." Rion looked at the stars above. "Then I will not fail." The queen's gaze followed his. "You will have many battles ahead. Some will not be with sword or shield. But as long as you remember why you fight, you will win." The sound of distant celebration reached them again, but the balcony felt peaceful. In that moment, Rion understood that the trials had only been the beginning. His real journey was about to start, and somewhere beyond the stars, forces unknown to both human and alien eyes were already moving. The choice the queen made today would soon echo far beyond their world.